Animal welfare is really making a change in the management on the farm, and in the end, animal welfare will also result in a different approach of consumers because they are thinking of these animals. The link between the animals and the plate will become closer.
Welcome to the Swine Canada podcast. I am Dan Columbus and I will be your host for today's episode. And with me today, I have Robert Hoste, who is a senior pig production economist at Wageningen University and research. So welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, just because some people listening might not be aware of who you are, I'll just ask you to give a brief introduction of yourself and kind of where you've been and where you're going.
Well, I'm Robert and I am working in Wageningen, and I was involved in pig production, in the economy of pig production, my entire working life. That's a bit over 30 years now. And I'm interested in anything, let's say farm level economy, but also on a rather macro level, so sector level, what's going on in the Dutch industry. I do research in supply chain cooperation. For example, questions like vertical integration. Would that be a model for the Netherlands, for Europe, and why? Why not? And also quite some international studies. This year I was in Finland because I am in Interpig. Interpig is a group of pig production economists like me, and I'm chairing this group. We are comparing pig production costs, and it is a nice forum to exchange information. So in Finland, I was in South Korea, I was in Brazil for a project, and we'll travel to China and to the Eurotier in Germany. So I'm also internationally interested to learn what is going on in the pig world worldwide. And within our institute, I'm involved in acquisition of projects, in leading, in performing projects. My role is the expert, let's say, and I'm heading the sector team on pig production in our institute. So when it comes to pigs, typically people come to me in our institute, let's say.
Yeah.
Working with nature and not against it, piglets fed AX3 see significant and improved feed efficiency. Producers know the reality of needing to reduce antibiotic and zinc use. AX3 Digest is a highly digestible novel protein that promotes improved in-barn performance, piglet health, and minimizes the need for zinc in the diet. For more information, visit www.protecta.com. That's www.protecta.com.
So maybe it'll come a little bit of surprise to the listeners because you're an economist, you're talking about economy, but the topic today is going to be welfare of pigs, which clearly has economic implications.
Yeah.
You know, people have talked, at least in Canada, about the move to loose sow housing, and in the U.S. with Proposition 12. And the first thing is, well, what is this going to cost me, right? So we'll get into things that I'm sure. So let's just start with, in your travels, what part of the world is interested in animal welfare, and maybe how does that differ depending on where you are?
Yeah, typically, so I'm in Europe. Typically, this is a topic in Northwestern Europe. It is initiated by Great Britain and some Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Finland, but now it is crossing the Atlantic, and you refer to it, Prop 12, etc. I saw it last year as I was in the US, in Iowa, and so I see it crossing over the world. Still, I think it will not go to every country. And the reason why I think this topic is interesting because it is a European toy, I would say it this way, but it is spreading to some parts of the world, and it is indeed having quite some economic effects, not only in a direct effect that the cost of production will increase, but also in the terms of management, because you must be able to manage the animals in a different way, also in marketing terms, because the question is, how can I market my pigs for a better price, and that my additional efforts are being compensated for. So it has indeed quite an economic aspect. An important driver of animal welfare is an important driver for meat consumption, let's start this way, is economic development and increasing income of consumers. And you could say it when basic needs are being satisfied, then there is also room for ethical issues such as planet protection, animal care, etc. There was a German, I think a philosopher, who put it this way. He said, erst das Fressen, dann die Moral. In English, it is said, first we want to eat, and then we can speak of ethical issues. So that is why we see also that, especially in developed countries, there is more interest for animal welfare and for other ethical issues such as planet protection, but also the way how we deal with people, with employees, etc. Now, when we look at demographics, we see increasing meat consumption with increasing income up to some level of wealth. And there's a tipping point. It differs among countries, it differs among meat types, but typically when we go beyond this tipping point, so in a high income class, then there is a shift towards more beef, to organic meat, to less meat, to vegetarian, etc. So it is very interesting to include also demographics. Now, when we speak of animal welfare, what is animal welfare? Well, the need for animal welfare is differently defined and understood. There is a law even in China on animal welfare, but this is only referring to animal welfare because it is some way related to the safety of food. So animals must be treated well because then our food is more safe. So my conclusion is there is no intrinsic driver regarding animal welfare.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talked about the demographics. I've always, or kind of learned it that unless you have the human rights, the animal rights, or to use a kind of hot term, right? That doesn't follow, right? Or you're not going to have the focus on that, and so. And definitely, like you're saying, with Northern Europe is definitely a leader, and we hear all the time in North America, it's like, well, they're doing this in Europe, so we know what's coming eventually, right? And so we better start looking at it. So beyond that, who are the drivers? Is it largely the consumer? Is it the industry that is seeing a need and pushing for this? Just because ethically they should improve welfare? Like where is the main driver coming from?
Yeah, the main driver, I think, are the NGOs. Because they have a strong voice and they can communicate well. And what I see, the role in Europe is very clear. And I think it's the same in California. It is the Humane Society, I think, at your side. And on our side, we have lots of NGOs very much interested in animal welfare and all those other issues. We even have a political party in our parliament. The Partij voor de Dieren, so the Party for the Animals. I would say this is also a kind of an NGO. And these ask attention for topics like animal welfare. And that also means that it is typically related to democratic countries. And that implicates that it will not spread to everywhere in the world. I would not expect animal welfare to become a topic in China, not for the economic reason, but there are no NGOs, not really NGOs, who could spread the word and ask the attention for this topic. So it will typically be a topic of democratic countries.
No, that makes sense. So keeping that in mind, I guess, what can we expect when it comes to animal welfare requirements worldwide?
On the first phase, what we often see is the classical adaptations, I would say, the increased space, playing material, that the sows should be kept free and, the no stalls. These are often the first steps. And that is what at least USA, I don't know Canada, but USA there's quite some attention to slaughter and to transport of animals. But for the rest, it is left to the industry. But these are, let's say, the classical adaptations. And then next, we see a ban on mutilations, such as tail docking, castration, teeth clipping. And castration, it is a topic that we are discussing in Europe already some 20 years. Tail docking the same. And now the Minister of Agriculture in the Netherlands some 5 years ago stated, as of 2030, we will have no tail docking anymore in the Netherlands. Well, that was a clear statement, but practice is very complicated. And farmers are really willing to find ways to dock the tails, but it is really not easy because pigs are anxious, they want to play, and or they don't feel well, and they start to bite and to investigate the tails of their pen mates. So a lot of research is being done, and it is a combination of many factors. There must be sufficient labor because the farmer's eye or the worker's eye is very important. Observation of the animals, must be playing materials, sufficient room, the climate should be well, etc. So all these factors, the feed quality, they play a role. But if these all are well managed and the pigs have long tails, they feel better and they perform better. So it is also an indicator for optimal husbandry. I was in Finland this summer and I saw finishing pigs in a kind of dust, straw dust, and they were with long tails, but they were doing really well. It looks nice also for the farmer, for the workers who are with the pigs, and they just enjoy it with them. So it is not only a threat, but it's also a chance, an opportunity. Tail docking, castration, etc. It is quite a challenge, yes, but there's also a gloomy perspective, I would say.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, it is an opportunity to do more. And I think research comes along with that. Because when you're talking specifically about these things, no castration, no tail docking, I'm sure if you went to a producer and said, you don't have to do that anymore, they're going to say, hallelujah, right? Because it's labor, it's time, it's not good for the pig and that too, right? But there is this kind of being like, well, this is how we do it. There's a reason we do it, so unless there's an alternative, what are we going to do? Right. So
I would like to add one point, and that is the organic production. It is found everywhere in the world, and still, I think organic production will be a market niche. There's a price difference, a substantial price difference to conventional pig meat. There are several biosecurity reasons, such as the risk of African swine fever to spread, or also food safety reasons like hepatitis E or worms, etc. The carbon footprint is higher, so there are quite some reasons why organic pig production is maybe not the most optimal system, and that just a very limited share of the consumers is willing to pay for this, as they see it as the best of the best, let's say. But I think it will stay a market niche.
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned specifically with organic, and that there is that price point, because one of the sticking, I think, for just generally improving welfare is that the producers don't get paid for that, right? And so it's another requirement that they don't necessarily get a return on. So how much do you think that plays into this, and whether or not that kind of the pay for the producers needs to change in order to improve the establishment of new welfare standards and new procedures?
Yeah, the consumer is key, but the consumer doesn't know. And there is the role of both the NGOs and the retailers, because in the end, the money must come from the consumer, but the retailer is to collect it. And the NGO is to convince the consumer to buy differently. So it is a combination, but don't blame the consumers themselves, because I am a consumer as well, and I'm not really looking at the package every time. What was the housing circumstances of the animal that was behind this package? It's a combination. It should be good interaction.
Yeah. Well, and at least in Canada, we are having it's all over the news that groceries cost too much already, right? So I'm sure if you went and said, well, now we want to charge even more to do this, consumers they're not going to like that. So
yeah, I see.
Yeah, getting the message out will be key. So I guess, it's probably fairly obvious from the conversation so far, but why is this, at least in certain parts of the world, a relevant topic to be looking at?
Well, part of the population is really committed to care for animals, to not eat them. I think it's a minority. What we see is that 5%, 8%, I think, of the Dutch people are not eating meat at all. It's less than 10%. And this is typically also related to animal welfare. So there is a minority really interested in the care for animals. However, there's a larger group of consumers who want to have a good conscience or a good feeling when they eat meat. They don't want to be blamed. I don't want to be blamed as consumer of eating dead animals. So there's quite some discussion on flight shame or whatever kind of shame, but there's also meat shame. And this is spread by NGOs again. Do not eat meat because you eat dead animals. Well, I think many consumers do hear this message several times, and some of them will be converted to not eat meat. But others say, well, let me do anything good to the animals, and that is sufficient to me. So there's quite some variation among the consumers. So doing something for the good of the animals, I think almost everyone is willing to. But we don't eat pets. We don't eat cats or dogs, And interestingly, animal welfare is not really a topic in South Korea. I've been in South Korea several times, and there was dog breeding and consumption. But recently, I think this year, a new law was given that it's not allowed to breed dogs and to serve them in restaurants anymore. So you see, these are our pets, and this comes closer to us as humans than pigs or cows or chicken.
Yeah, that reminds me, there was a PETA ad that had gone out, and it was a billboard, with everything from a dog to a horse to the pig and the livestock. And it's like, where do you draw the line, right? And it was always a very interesting question. And there are some instances, like the dogs in certain Asian countries and guinea pigs down in Peru and stuff like that, where it's something that we would consider a pet and would never think of eating, and is a delicacy in another country, right? So I guess the big question, is, and you kind of answered it already, but with all this focus on animal welfare, are we still going to be able to eat meat? Or I guess what is going to be the impact on that is maybe a bigger question.
Yeah, so there are several factors playing a role in the amount of meat that we eat, but the decision to not eat meat at all is typically what we see also in our countries in Northwestern Europe. It is just a minority. So the majority of people don't mind to eat meat. And all those billboards and advertisements and political parties, etc., they do influence some part of the of the audience, but not everyone. So the majority of people still wants to eat meat, and for some part of the world population, it is even necessary because it's a good protein, it's a good source of vitamins and irons, etc. So we should not be the preachers of no, you should not eat meat anymore. So they will do, because incomes are increasing, like in Asia, like in Africa, and people are so willing to eat more meat because that's related to wealth, that's related to healthy food. It's also a matter of habit. Typically, older people like to eat meat. This is historically associated with wealth and health, but this older generation will fade away, and then a new generation is coming. The new elderly people, probably they will eat substantially less meat because they were not raised as youngsters. You should eat meat because that's good and healthy. My mother-in-law is living in Germany, and when I'm visiting them, then she is offering meat, and I should eat a double piece of meat. Why? Because I'm a male. This is the way it was, and she's 80 plus, and that's the way how the older generation is thinking compared to what I do. I say, well, no, I'm not working in the field. One piece is okay. So this kind of discussion. But this elderly people will fade away. So there's also kind of demographic that for that reason already the meat consumption will go down. China. Pig meat is very much related to the culture and to the kitchen of the Chinese. I know only one Chinese character, and that stands for a house or a community, and that looks like a pig under a roof. And that's also literally the description of the character. But it is a pig under a roof. So if you have a pig under your roof, you will have a good community. There's more than that. Also, when you eat pig feet, you will have a good walk of life. This kind of cultural ideas is very common in China. So I would expect they will still eat meat even after the ASF problems in 2019, and but they were reducing now their pig meat consumption because it has been too expensive. They have no money for that to buy, and now they are trying to find alternatives like broiler meat, like beef, and more fish, and so they're looking for alternatives. So yes, habits can change, and so there are several factors playing a role. There's more income, more wealth that demands for more meat. On the other hand, the elderly people that are used to eat more meat, they are fading away. There is influence of those NGOs who say we should take care of animal welfare and eat less meat, etc. But in the end, I think we will see a further increase of the total consumption of pig meat in the world.
Yeah, no, great information. So just final opportunity to kind of give a take-home message to our listeners.
Well, animal welfare is really making a change in the management on the farm, and in the end, animal welfare will also result in a different approach of consumers, because they are thinking of these animals. The link between the animals and the plate will become closer, and in the end, the consumers might decide. Some consumers might decide to not eat meat anymore. But that's for the minority. For the majority, I think there's really an opportunity to have increased animal welfare at a slightly higher price for the consumers. And it is an opportunity. What I said of the long tails, if you have a well management and you are able as a farmer to make the pigs with long tails, then it is really nice to be in your farm. So it is an opportunity, and it's not a too big threat. Let me say it differently, this way. Yeah.
No, very good. Well, Robert, before I let you go, we have our 3 questions we ask every guest. So our first one is, what is your favorite pig or agricultural related resource?
Is it okay to focus on food? I like
Sure.
good food, and especially the pig's cheek. It's really nice. I like it. If it is prepared slowly and then well spiced, etc., it's really nice food. So that's a favorite resource for my stomach, for my tongue. It's
Sure.
a bit different.
I mean, that's probably the most unique answer we've ever had for that question. So that's good. So our next one is a book or resource outside of pigs that you would recommend.
Yeah. Well, I do read a lot, but my favorite book is the Bible. I'm a Christian. I'm reading the Bible because for me, that's the source of life. And I'm reading it every day. And well, to combine it with the pigs, there's little said about pigs in the Bible and nothing good. So indeed, this question is the resource outside of swine, let's say.
Well, I mean, that you can't get much more outside swine then. Yeah. And then our final question is, when you look back at leaders, mentors, producers, what is a characteristic that you think sets the successful ones apart?
Yeah, what I see here in the Netherlands, successful entrepreneurs, farmers, entrepreneurs, is that they have focus and dedication. They not only oversee the farm strategy, but also the operational issues. So anything that is playing a role on their farm, they know everything, they see everything. They are not easily satisfied. So focus and dedication.
Yeah, well, great. Well, it's been great having you on the show. Very good discussion. I really enjoyed it. So we'll just thank you again for joining us.
It was my pleasure.